Billionaire father freezes when he hears his daughter call the housekeeper mom, and weeps when he learns the truth. Colin Mercer's mansion sat atop a quiet hill in a neighborhood far from the city center. It was the kind of place featured in architecture magazines, modern lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, perfectly arranged furniture. Everything was always in order, clean, organized, and empty. Strangely empty. Colin turned off his phone's alarm. He didn't really need it. His body had already grown accustomed to waking up at the exact same time every day, like a well-oiled machine. That was the kind of person Colin had become. Precise, efficient, functional. "Tessa," he called out, adjusting his navy blue tie in front of the hallway mirror. "Time to get up." Silence answered first, as it always did in that house, too large for just two people. Colin's mansion sat atop a quiet hill in a neighborhood far from the city center. It was the kind of place featured in architecture magazines, modern lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, perfectly arranged furniture. Everything was always in order, clean, organized, and empty, strangely empty. "Tessa," he called again, this time walking toward the girls' room. The door was slightly ajar. Colin pushed it open slowly and found his daughter already sitting on her bed, hugging a worn-out rag doll, her large blue eyes gazing out the window. Her light blonde hair, almost platinum, fell over her small shoulders like a golden curtain. "Good morning," he said, trying to soften his voice. It wasn't something that came naturally. "Say good morning," Tessa replied softly, without taking her eyes off the window. Colin observed the room for a moment. It was the only room in the house that clashed with the minimalist decor. There were colorful drawings tacked to the walls, a collection of dolls carefully lined up on a shelf, and a small table with colored pencils scattered about. A child sanctuary amidst the adult coldness of the rest of the house. "Ready for breakfast? I made pancakes," Colin lied. In reality, the housekeeper had left everything ready the night before. He just had to heat them up. Tessa nodded and climbed off the bed, still clutching the doll. Her bare feet barely made a sound on the wooden floor as she followed her father to the kitchen. She was a naturally quiet girl, as if she had learned from an early age to take up as little space as possible in the world. The kitchen, like the rest of the house, was impeccable. White marble countertops, stainless steel appliances, everything clean and shiny under the light pouring in through the large windows. Colin placed the pancakes on a plate and poured some orange juice for his daughter. "I have to leave earlier today," he informed her, glancing at his watch. "I have an important meeting with investors. Mrs. Parker will come stay with you until it's time for school." "She doesn't like me," Tessa whispered, poking at her pancake with a fork. Colin frowned. "Of course she does. Why would you say that?" "She never smiles at me. She just stares at her phone." A heavy silence settled between them. Colin didn't know what to say. Hiring nannies and housekeepers had become a difficult task after Eliza, his wife, passed away 3 years ago. No one ever stayed for long. Perhaps it was the atmosphere of the house, or perhaps it was him, incapable of creating any kind of human warmth that made people want to stay. "I'll talk to her," he finally said, taking a sip of coffee. The phone rang, saving him from having to elaborate. Colin answered quickly and began talking about numbers, deadlines, and strategies. Meanwhile, Tessa ate in silence, her eyes occasionally lifting to watch her father. At 38, Colin Mercer was the kind of man business magazines loved to feature on their covers. Tall, chown with an athletic build maintained by religiously scheduled gym visits, brown hair always perfectly cut, and grey eyes that rarely revealed what he was thinking. He ran Mercer Enterprises with the same efficiency he organized his house. Everything worked perfectly, but without warmth. It hadn't always been this way. There was a time when Colin smiled more, talked more, lived more, before Eliza got sick, before he spent 2 years watching her slowly fade away in a hospital bed, before he was left alone with a newly adopted baby and a world of responsibilities. "I have to go," he announced after hanging up the phone. "Brush your teeth and get dressed. Mrs. Parker should be here in 15 minutes. Tessa nodded, sliding out of her chair. Before leaving the kitchen, however, she stopped and looked at her father. "Will you be home late today?" The question was simple, but loaded with meaning. Colin felt a familiar pang of guilt. "I'll try to make it for dinner," he replied, knowing he probably wouldn't be able to keep that promise. Tessa said nothing, just nodded and left. Colin finished his coffee quickly, grabbed his leather briefcase from the counter, and headed to the garage. The smooth engine of the black Audi sports car momentarily broke the morning silence. Before reversing, he looked at the house, imposing, elegant, and completely lifeless. When Colin left, Tessa ran to her room. She opened the drawer of her nightstand and took out a small photo album. She sat on the bed and began to flip through it carefully. There were only a few photos. She as a baby in the arms of a smiling Eliza, Colin hugging both of them, a picnic in the garden, memories of a time she could barely remember, but which she treasured. The doorbell rang, announcing Mrs. Parker's arrival. Tessa quickly closed the album and hid it back in the drawer. She grabbed her backpack and went downstairs. The middle-aged woman was checking messages on her phone when Tessa appeared in the entryway. "Good morning, Tessa," Mrs. Parker said, without really looking at her. "Have you had breakfast?" "Yes, Ma'am." "Good. Go get your toothbrush and let's get ready for school." Tessa obeyed silently. As she brushed her teeth, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. A small 5-year-old girl looked back at her, with eyes too big for her delicate face, carrying a seriousness that no child should have. Later at school, the teacher asked everyone to draw their families. Tessa took her colored pencils and began to draw. First, a big house, then a tall figure dressed in black, her father. Next to him, she placed a small girl with yellow hair. She hesitated for a moment, then drew a third figure, floating above them like an angel, with a big smile on its face. "Who is this, Tessa?" asked the teacher, looking over her shoulder. "My mom," she replied simply. "She's in heaven now." The teacher gently squeezed her shoulder and moved on to see the other children's drawings. Tessa continued coloring, adding a sun in the corner of the paper, but it was a pale sun, one that couldn't truly warm the house she had drawn. In the silent mansion on the hill, the wind blew through the manicured garden, gently swaying the empty swings Colin had installed last summer, a birthday present Tessa rarely used. Inside the house, the clock's hands continued their steady, relentless movement, marking the hours in a residence where time seemed to have frozen, along with its inhabitants' ability to truly connect. It was a perfect house that didn't know how to smile. "We need someone reliable this time," Colin said into the phone as he drove to work. "Someone who actually knows what they're doing and doesn't just stare at their phone all day." The housekeeping agency had called for the third time that week. After the last housekeeper quit without notice, the Mercer house was running on autopilot. Colin had installed the most expensive dishwasher on the market and subscribed to a high-end frozen meal delivery service, but even he had to admit it wasn't a permanent solution. "I have a candidate who might work," said the woman on the other end of the line. "Elena Brooks, 32 years old, excellent references, available immediately. She has experience with families and children." Colin sighed. He had heard this before. "All right, you can send her resume by email. If it looks suitable, she can start on Monday." As he hung up, Colin realized he had promised to come home early that day. Tessa had mentioned something about a drawing she wanted to show him. Was it yesterday or last week? The days blurred together in his mind, filled with meetings, contracts, and business decisions. When he finally got home, it was past 9 at night. The living room lights were on, but there was no sign of Tessa. Colin loosened his tie and went up the stairs, his footsteps echoing through the silent house. His daughter's bedroom door was ajar. He peeked inside and saw her sleeping, hugging the same old rag doll. On the nightstand, there was a colorful drawing. Colin moved closer to look. It was a child's version of himself, next to a small figure that must have been Tessa. Between them, there was a large empty space. In the corner of the paper, a note written in the clumsy handwriting of a 5-year-old, "For Daddy, I love you." Colin felt a lump in his throat. He adjusted the blanket over Tessa, picked up the drawing, and left the room. In the living room, he poured himself a whiskey and looked at the piece of paper again. The empty space between the two figures seemed to scream at him. Elena Brooks adjusted the bag on her shoulder as she waited in front of the grand entrance of the Mercer mansion. She wore a simple outfit, jeans, a white t-shirt, and a light jacket. Her blonde hair was tied back in a practical bun. She took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell, trying to control the trembling in her hands. She had studied everything about Colin Mercer over the past few weeks. Successful businessman, widower, adoptive father of a 5-year-old girl. The house they lived in was exactly as she had imagined. Imposing, elegant, isolated. The kind of place where a child could have everything, except what really mattered. The door opened and she found herself facing a tall man with a serious expression. Colin Mercer looked older in person than in the photos she had seen online, not in years, but in experience, as if he carried an invisible weight on his shoulders. "Miss Brooks?" he asked, extending his hand formally. "Yes, Elena Brooks. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Mercer." The handshake was brief and professional. Colin led her inside, explaining the house rules as they walked through the immaculate rooms. Elena tried to pay attention, but her eyes instinctively searched for any sign of the child. The cleaning supplies are all organized in the pantry. Mrs. Parker, the nanny, brings Tessa home from school at 3. I usually get home from work after 7. Any questions? Eleanor shook her head. "No, sir. I understand everything. I can start right away if you'd like." Colin seemed momentarily surprised by her efficiency. "Great. I'll leave you to it then. I have a meeting in half an hour." He paused, as if trying to remember something important. "Oh, and my daughter sometimes likes to stay in her room drawing. Try not to disturb her." Eleanor nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "Of course, comrade, sir." When Colin left, Eleanor stood still for a moment, absorbing the silence of the house. She ran her fingers over the polished surface of a coffee table, noticing there were no family photographs, no signs of life beyond the sterile perfection of expensive furniture. She began her work on the ground floor, cleaning each room with meticulous care, trying not to think about the inevitable encounter that was to come. It was almost 3 o'clock when she heard the sound of the front door opening. Female voices echoed through the entryway, one adult, rushed and impatient, and another small, almost inaudible. Elena was in the upstairs hallway, making a bed in one of the guest rooms. Her hands froze mid-motion. "I'll pick you up at 6, Tessa. Don't forget to do your homework before you play," said the older voice. "Yes, ma'am," the little voice replied. The door closed again. Eleanor heard light footsteps coming up the stairs. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a second. She had rehearsed this moment hundreds of times, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of it. A small girl appeared in the hallway, her pink backpack almost bigger than her back. She stopped abruptly when she saw Elena. Large blue eyes stared at her with curiosity from under a fringe of light blonde hair. For a moment, Elena felt the world stop spinning. It was like looking into a mirror of her own past. "Hi," the girl said shyly. Elena swallowed hard, silently thanking the years of practice in hiding her emotions. "Hello," she replied, forcing a casual smile. "You must be Tessa. I'm Elena, the new housekeeper." Tessa watched her for a moment, her head tilted slightly to the side. "The last housekeeper didn't like my doll," she commented, gripping the strap of her backpack. "She said it was too old and I should get new toys." Eleanor knelt to be at the girl's level, maintaining a respectful distance. "Well, I think old dolls are special. They hold a lot of stories." A small smile appeared on Tessa's face. "Do you want to see my room?" "I have lots of dolls." "Of course, if you don't mind showing me." Elena followed Tessa to the room at the end of the hall. Upon entering, she felt an immediate contrast with the rest of the house. While the mansion was all neutral tones and cold surfaces, Tessa's room exploded with color, drawings on the walls, children's books stacked up, a quilt patterned with stars. It was a small universe where the girl's personality could exist freely. "This is Sally," Tessa said, picking up the worn-out rag doll from the bed. "She's my best friend." Eleanor looked at the doll with genuine attention. It was the kind of handmade toy, with buttons for eyes and yarn for hair. Something about it seemed strangely familiar. "She's beautiful," she commented, her voice slightly shaky. "Have you had her for a long time?" Tessa hugged the doll. "Forever. Dad said she came with me when I was a baby." Eleanor looked away. pretending to be interested in the bookshelves to hide the sudden emotion that threatened to overflow. Her fingers touched the spine of a children's book, trying to regain her composure. "Do you like stories?" she asked after a moment. "Yes," Tessa's eyes lit up. "But Dad doesn't have much time to read to me. He's always tired." "I understand." Eleanor smiled gently. "Well, I need to get back to cleaning now, but it was very nice to meet you and Sally." Tessa nodded, looking slightly disappointed. "Will you be back tomorrow?" "Yes, I'll be here every weekday." "Cool." Elena left the room with her heart pounding against her chest. She leaned against the hallway wall for a moment, breathing deeply. She had imagined this meeting in so many different ways, but nothing compared to the reality of standing before those eyes so much like her own. In the following weeks, Eleanor established a routine at the Mercer house. She arrived early, before Colin left for work, and stayed until late afternoon. Gradually, she noticed the dynamics of the house, how Colin and Tessa rarely shared the same space for more than a few minutes, how the girl ate alone most of the time, how the house, despite all its luxury, felt more like a transit point than a home. In her third week, Eleanor was cleaning Colin's office when she found a folder with adoption papers. Her heart raced. She knew she shouldn't look, but her fingers moved automatically, opening the folder. The official documents were there, with dates, names, and stamps. Elena read quickly, confirming what she already knew. She closed the folder and placed it exactly where it had been, feeling a mixture of relief and pain. That afternoon, she found Tessa sitting at the kitchen table trying to do her homework. "Can I help?" Elena offered, setting aside her cleaning cloth. Tessa looked at her in surprise, then nodded shyly. "It's about colors and shapes. I have to draw things that match." Eleanor pulled up a chair and sat next to the girl. Gently, she began to explain the exercise, watching how Tessa bit her lip in concentration, a gesture she herself used to make as a child. As they worked together, Eleanor noticed the drawings scattered across the table. "You draw very well," she commented, pointing to one of them. "I especially like the colors you choose." Tessa's face lit up with the compliment. "I love to draw. Do you want to see my favorite drawing?" Without waiting for a response, Tessa ran to her backpack and pulled out a carefully folded piece of paper. It was a drawing of her with Colin, but there was a third figure floating above them, like an angel. "That's Mommy," Tessa explained, pointing to the figure. "So she's in heaven, but Daddy says she still watches over me." Elena felt a lump in her throat. "It's a very beautiful drawing," she managed to say, her voice little more than a whisper. "Do you have any children?" Tessa asked suddenly. The question caught Elena by surprise. She hesitated for a moment. "No, I don't have any children living with me." "Did you want to?" Elena smiled sadly. "Yes, very much." They returned to the homework in silence. Elena discreetly watched every detail of the girl, the way she held her pencil, the little wrinkle that formed between her eyebrows when she concentrated, the way she swung her feet that didn't reach the floor. These were precious gestures she stored away like treasures. In the days that followed, Elena began to notice subtle changes. Tessa would wait for her after school, often sitting on the stairs with Sally in her arms. She would show her drawings, talk about what she had learned in class, and ask simple things like Elena's favorite color, or if she liked chocolate ice cream. One afternoon, while Eleanor was cleaning the living room windows, Tessa approached with a book in her hands. "Could you read to me?" she asked, her voice small and hopeful. "Just a little bit." Eleanor glanced at the clock. There was still an hour before Mrs. Parker would come to get Tessa. "Of course," she replied with a smile. "Let's sit right here." They sat together on the living room sofa, Tessa snuggling comfortably next to Elena. The book was about a girl who found a fallen star and helped it get back home. Elena read with different voices for each character, making Tessa laugh with her exaggerated interpretations. "You read better than Mrs. Parker," Tessa commented when they finished the story. "She always skips parts." Elena laughed softly. "Thank you. I really like stories. Can you read again tomorrow?" "If we have time, of course." Tessa smiled, and to Elena's surprise, rested her head on her shoulder for a brief moment. It was such a small, innocent gesture, but Eleanor felt as if her heart might burst with emotion. Carefully, she ran a hand through the girl's golden hair, allowing herself this one moment of true connection. "You smell nice," Tessa said sleepily, "like cookies." Elena smiled, fighting back the tears that threatened to form. "That must be the perfume I use," she replied, her voice slightly choked. "It has vanilla in it." That night, after leaving the Mercer house, Elena drove to a small apartment on the other side of town. It was a modest but cozy place, decorated with plants and photographs. She sat at the kitchen table and opened a box she kept hidden in the back of a closet. Inside was a rag doll identical to Sally, only newer and less worn. Elena held it against her chest, finally allowing the tears to fall freely. 5 years of waiting, of searching, of careful planning. 5 years of a pain that never fully subsided. Meanwhile, in the silent mansion on the hill, Tessa slept clutching her doll, dreaming of stories about falling stars and a woman who smelled like cookies and somehow made the cold house feel a little warmer. Autumn progressed, turning the trees around the Mercer mansion into explosions of red and gold. The changing of the seasons seemed to mirror the subtle transformation occurring within those walls. Little by little, the house was beginning to come to life. Elena was now a part of Tessa's daily routine. Every afternoon after school, the girl would run home, hoping to find the housekeeper. It didn't matter what tasks Elena was performing, polishing the silverware, cleaning the tall windows, or organizing the cabinets, Tessa always found a way to be nearby. "Do you think clouds taste like cotton candy?" Tessa asked one Thursday afternoon as she watched Elena fluff the sofa cushions. Elena smiled at the unexpected question. I don't think so. They probably taste like water, since they're made of tiny little droplets." "But they're so fluffy," Tessa protested, kneeling on the sofa to look out the window. "I think they should at least smell like cotton candy." "Maybe the pink clouds at sunset," Elena suggested, playing along. "Those might smell like strawberries." Tessa laughed, delighted with the idea. Eleanor watched her discreetly as she continued her work. The girl had been different in recent weeks, more talkative, smiling more. Her light blue eyes had a sparkle that wasn't there when they first met. It was as if an inner light had been switched on. Colin had also noticed the change, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. On a rare morning when he managed to have breakfast with his daughter, he commented on how much more cheerful she seemed. "Are you enjoying your new school?" he asked, watching her eat her cereal with enthusiasm. "Yes," Tessa replied, swinging her little legs in the chair. "But I like coming home more." "Really? Why is that?" "Because of Eleanor. She's my friend." Colin frowned, surprised by the declaration. "Elena, the housekeeper?" "She's not just a housekeeper," Tessa corrected with the seriousness only children can muster. "She reads stories, knows how to make paper origami, and says my drawings are the most beautiful she's ever seen." Colin was silent for a moment, processing the information. It had been a long time since he'd seen Tessa talk about someone with such enthusiasm. On one hand, he felt relieved to see his daughter happier. On the other, a pang of jealousy. He rarely had time to read stories or praise drawings. "Well, it's good that you two get along," he finally said, looking at his watch. "I have to go now. Have a good day at school." After Colin left, Eleanor arrived to start her workday. She found Tessa finishing her breakfast, alone in the enormous kitchen. "Good morning, sunshine," Eleanor greeted, using the nickname she had created for the girl. Tessa smiled widely, revealing the gap from a newly lost baby tooth. "Good morning. Look, my tooth fell out last night." "Wow. Did the tooth fairy visit you?" "Yes." Tessa nodded vigorously. "She left $5 under my pillow." Elena raised her eyebrows. $5? That must be a very generous tooth fairy." "Dad said it's because it was my first tooth." Tessa shrugged, as if $5 were no big deal. For her, it probably wasn't, considering the material abundance she lived in. Mrs. Parker arrived to take Tessa to school, interrupting the conversation. Before leaving, the girl turned to Eleanor. "I have a surprise for you later." Elena smiled, intrigued. "I can't wait to see it." After Tessa left, Elena began her daily cleaning routine. She cherished the time alone in the house. It was when she could absorb the small details of Tessa's life that Colin, perhaps because he was always rushing, didn't notice, like the growing collection of seashells on her bedroom windowsill, or the way she organized her books by color and not by size, or the favorite clothes she wore repeatedly, despite a closet full of options. Eleanor knew she was getting too attached. With each passing day, the line between her role as an employee and her desire to be present in Tessa's life grew blurrier. Sometimes, when she was alone, she allowed herself to imagine a different reality, one where she could simply tell the truth, where she could be more than just the housekeeper. Around 3 in the afternoon, Tessa returned from school, bursting through the front door like a small blonde hurricane. "Elena!" "Eleanor," she called, dropping her backpack in the middle of the entryway. Elena appeared at the kitchen door, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I'm here. How was school today?" Tessa ran to her, holding something hidden behind her back. "It was fun. We did art today." Her face was lit with restrained excitement. "Close your eyes." "Close my eyes?" "Yes." "For the surprise." Eleanor smiled and obediently closed her eyes, holding out her hands. She felt a piece of paper being carefully placed in her palms. "You can open them now." Eleanor opened her eyes and looked down at the colorful drawing. It showed 2 figures holding hands, a small one with yellow hair and a larger one with hair of the same color. Both were smiling broadly, and a large sun shone in the upper corner. Above the drawing, in uneven, colorful letters, Tessa had written, "Me and my new friend." It was as if something inside Elena broke and mended itself all at once. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, and it took all her willpower not to let the tears fall. This simple piece of paper, this innocent gesture, meant more to her than any gift she had ever received. "It's so beautiful," Elena said, her voice soft and slightly shaky. "I will treasure this." Tessa beamed, pleased with the reaction. "Do you really like it?" "I really, really like it. It's the most special drawing anyone has ever made for me." The girl jumped for joy, throwing her arms around Eleanor's waist in a spontaneous hug. Eleanor froze for a second, surprised, before gently returning the embrace, feeling Tessa's soft hair against her cheek. "You can hang it in your house," Tessa suggested, looking up with bright eyes. "On the fridge. That's where people put important drawings." Elena nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'll put it in the most special place in my house." "What place is that?" Elena pretended to think deeply. "I think next to my bed, so it's the first thing I see when I wake up in the morning." Tessa seemed to like that idea, her blue eyes lighting up with approval. Then, as if she had just remembered something important, she grabbed her backpack from the floor and took out a small box of crayons. "Can we draw some more?" she asked hopefully. "Of course. Let's go to the kitchen. The table is bigger there." In the sunny kitchen, they sat side by side at the large wooden table. Eleanor arranged some blank sheets of paper she found in a drawer, while Tessa carefully organized her crayons by color. "What are we going to draw today?" Eleanor asked. "Anything," Tessa replied cheerfully. "You can draw your house." Eleanor hesitated for a moment. Her small apartment didn't have much to be drawn. "How about we draw a place we'd like to go together? Like an amusement park." "Exactly." They began to draw, working on their own papers. Eleanor discreetly watched how Tessa held the crayon with determination, her tongue peeking out the corner of her mouth in concentration, a gesture Elena herself made as a child. It was small details like this that always caught her off guard, reminding her of the invisible connection they shared. "Look, I made a huge Ferris wheel," Tessa exclaimed, showing her colorful drawing. "And here we are at the top." Elena smiled, looking at the 2 figures at the top of the Ferris wheel. "That's amazing. You're very talented. What about yours?" Elena turned her paper around, revealing a more detailed drawing, but with the same theme, an amusement park full of color and movement. "Wow!" Tessa's eyes widened. "You draw almost like a real artist." "Thank you. I've always liked to draw." "Just like me," Tessa exclaimed, fascinated by the coincidence. They continued to draw in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Elena watched as the afternoon light streamed through the kitchen windows, creating golden patterns in Tessa's hair. There was a peace in this moment that contrasted sharply with the turmoil of emotions inside her. Tessa suddenly stopped drawing and looked at Elena with a curious expression. "Mark, can I ask you something?" "Of course you can. Do you have a mommy?" The question took Elena by surprise. "I did. She passed away a few years ago." "Did she go to heaven like mine?" Elena nodded gently. "Yes, something like that." "Do you miss her?" "Every single day." Tessa absorbed the information, her little face serious as she processed it. "Sometimes I wish I could remember my mom," she said finally. "Dad has some pictures, but I was too little when she left. I can't remember what her voice sounded like." Elena felt her heart ache. "I'm sure she had a beautiful voice," she said softly, "and that she loved you very much." "How do you know?" "Because," Elena paused, choosing her words carefully, "because it's impossible not to love you, Tessa." The girl smiled, satisfied with the answer. She went back to drawing, adding more colors to her imaginary amusement park. Elena watched her, feeling a mix of love and pain that had become familiar. After a few minutes of silence, Tessa looked up again, studying Elena's face with a surprising intensity for a 5-year-old. "Say it's weird," she said slowly, tilting her head. "It feels like I already know you." The words hit Elena like an electric shock. She felt the air leave her lungs, and as much as she tried to maintain her composure, a tear escaped and ran down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, but not quickly enough. "Why are you crying?" Tessa asked, concerned. "Did I say something wrong?" "No, sweetie," Elena replied, forcing a smile as more tears threatened to fall. "You didn't say anything wrong. It's just, sometimes people cry when they're happy." "Are you happy because you know me?" "Very happy. More than you can imagine." Tessa seemed to accept the explanation, though her eyes continued to study Elena's face with a curiosity that was beyond her years. It was as if, on some deep, instinctive level, she could sense there was something more to this connection. "I'm happy I know you too," she declared finally, returning to her drawing. "The house is more fun since you came." Elena smiled through her contained tears, grateful for the resilience of children, for their ability to accept things as they are without needing complicated explanations. She wished she could be as simple as Tessa, accepting the joy of the present moment without burdening it with the weight of the past or the anxiety of the future. The rest of the afternoon passed peacefully, with the two of them drawing, talking, and laughing. When Mrs. Parker arrived to take Tessa for dinner, the girl was reluctant to part from Elena. "Will you be here tomorrow?" she asked, standing at the kitchen door. "I'll be here every day, remember?" "Promise. I promise." Satisfied, Tessa said goodbye with a wave and followed Mrs. Parker upstairs. Elena was left alone in the kitchen, holding the drawing with the phrase, "Me and my new friend." Carefully, she folded it and put it in her pants pocket. Later, after her shift ended, Elena drove to her apartment with a heart lighter than it had been in years. She went into her simple bedroom and opened the nightstand drawer where she kept her most precious treasures. Gently, she placed Tessa's drawing next to the yellowed photo of a newborn baby and the hospital bracelet with the name Tessa Brooks. "My daughter," Elena whispered to the empty room, allowing herself to say the words she had held in her heart for so long. "My little girl." She lay down on the bed and looked at the drawing one last time before turning off the light. The simple, sincere words, "Me and my new friend," shone in the darkness like a promise that, maybe, one day, they could be much more than just friends. Saturday afternoon arrived with a surprisingly clear autumn sky. Colin had promised to take Tessa to the zoo, but an urgent work call forced him to cancel their plans. Another broken promise on the long list he tried not to think about. "I just need to handle an emergency at the office," he explained to his daughter over breakfast. "I'll be back in a few hours, I promise." Tessa just nodded, already used to this kind of situation. Her blue eyes, normally so expressive, seemed resigned. "Okay, Daddy." Colin felt the familiar guilt tighten in his chest, but he quickly pushed it away. "Elena is coming today, so you won't be alone. You can watch a movie or something." The girl's face immediately lit up at the sound of the housekeeper's name. This sudden change in mood did not go unnoticed by Colin. Lately, he had noticed how Tessa transformed in Eleanor's presence. More talkative, more cheerful, more of a child. "Eleanor is coming today," Tessa asked, suddenly excited. "But it's Saturday. I asked her to come in for some extra cleaning since we'll have visitors next week," Colin explained, drinking the rest of his coffee. "I really need to go now." He kissed his daughter's forehead and left, promising himself he would be back as soon as possible. Maybe there would still be time to take Tessa somewhere in the late afternoon. Elena arrived shortly after 10 in the morning. She found Tessa in the living room, watching cartoons with Sally, her inseparable rag doll, on her lap. "Good morning, sunshine," she greeted, leaving her bag on the side table near the door. "Elena?" Tessa jumped off the sofa and ran to hug her. "I thought you didn't come on Saturdays." "Your dad asked me to come in today." Elena smiled, stroking the girl's golden hair. "Dad, it seems you'll have guests next week." "Yeah, some boring friends from work." Tessa made a face that made Elena laugh. "They always talk about things I don't understand and call me young lady, eh?" The hours passed peacefully. Eleanor cleaned the rooms on the first floor, while Tessa followed her around, telling stories from school, showing her new drawings, and asking questions about everything. It was a dynamic they both cherished, these simple conversations, this casual intimacy that had developed naturally between them. After they had lunch together, Elena started cleaning Colin's office while Tessa drew, sitting in a chair too large for her small frame. The comfortable silence between them was only broken by the soft sound of pencil on paper. "Elena?" Tessa called out suddenly. "Yes, sweetie." "Why do you and I have the same smile?" The question caught Elena completely off guard. She stopped wiping the bookshelf and looked at Tessa, trying to maintain her composure. "What do you mean?" "I saw it in a picture Mrs. Parker took of us. We have the same smile, kind of crooked right here." Tessa pointed to the left corner of her mouth. "And our hair is exactly the same." Eleanor swallowed hard. It was true. They both had the same slightly asymmetrical smile, a small inherited trait that Elena had noticed from day one but had never commented on. "Sometimes people look alike, even if they're not from the same family," she replied, trying to sound casual. "It's just a coincidence." Tessa didn't seem convinced. Her small face showed the same thoughtful expression Eleanor recognized in herself when trying to solve a difficult problem. "Do you have any children?" the girl asked, changing the subject slightly. Elena hesitated. She knew she was treading on dangerous ground. But something about that quiet afternoon, that special connection they felt, made her want to be more honest. "No, not with me," she finally answered. "What do you mean by not with me?" Tessa frowned, confused. "Sometimes, mommies can't stay with their babies, even when they really want to." Tessa seemed to absorb this information, her blue eyes serious and thoughtful. "Like my mom, she wanted to stay with me, but she went to heaven." Elena felt a lump in her throat. Eliza Mercer, Tessa's adoptive mother, had died when the girl was only 2. To Tessa, that was her story, a beloved mother who left too soon. "Something like that," she replied softly. Tessa went back to her drawing, but her expression remained pensive. Elena resumed her cleaning, her heart beating erratically. Maybe she had said too much. Maybe it was better to change the subject. "What are you drawing?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "A family," Tessa answered without looking up. "Me, Daddy, and you." Elena stopped again, leaning on the bookshelf for support. The simple, innocent comment hit her like a wave. "That's a beautiful drawing," she managed to say. Tessa finally looked up at her, her clear eyes filled with an emotion that seemed too big for her small body. "I wish I had a mommy so much," she said softly. "You could be mine." The world seemed to stop. Eleanor looked at that child, her child, feeling all the carefully constructed barriers of the years crumble before such simple, sincere words. 5 years of secrets, of silent pain, of watching from afar while another raised the daughter she had been forced to give up. Without thinking about the consequences, Eleanor approached Tessa and knelt before her. She took the small hands in hers and, with tears in her eyes, finally said the words she had held back for so long. "Tessa, I am your mother, The girl's eyes widened, not with shock or confusion, but with a kind of recognition, as if something inside her had always known. "Really?" she asked in a whisper. "Are you my real mum?" Elena nodded, unable to speak as the tears streamed freely down her face. A slow smile spread across Tessa's face, lighting it up like the sun after a storm. "So I have a mommy again," she said softly, testing the words. And then, with more confidence, "Mommy." It was at that exact moment that a sound at the door made Eleanor look up. Colin was standing in the office doorway, a look of absolute shock frozen on his face. He had returned from work early, hoping to surprise Tessa with movie tickets, an attempt to make up for the cancelled outing. Instead, he found his daughter calling the housekeeper, "Mommy." Time seemed to freeze. No one moved. No one breathed. The air in the office grew heavy with the weight of that finally revealed secret. Colin's eyes fixed on Elena's, shocked, confused, then slowly turning into something more dangerous, understanding. His gaze shifted between Elena and Tessa, noticing the resemblances that had been in front of him all along. The same light blonde hair, the same blue eyes, the same face shape, the same slightly crooked smile. "Daddy!" Tessa exclaimed, oblivious to the sudden tension in the room. "Elena is my real mom, isn't that amazing?" Colin remained paralyzed at the door, his expression a mixture of emotions impossible to decipher. The briefcase he was holding slipped from his hands and fell to the floor with a dull thud, scattering papers across the immaculate carpet. It was the only sound in the silent room where 3 lives had just irrevocably collided. The silence in the office was as thick as fog. No one moved. Time seemed suspended between one heartbeat and the next, as if the universe itself was waiting to see what would happen. Colin was the first to break the stillness. He bent down slowly, gathering the papers scattered on the floor with mechanical movements. His hands were trembling slightly, and when he stood up, Tessa and Elena could see his eyes were glistening with tears. "Tessa," he said finally, his voice choked with the effort of controlling his emotion. "Can you go to your room, please?" The girl looked from Colin to Elena, confused by the sudden change in atmosphere. "But Daddy, I just found out that—" "Now, Tessa," Colin interrupted, his voice hardening slightly, even as a single tear rolled down his cheek. Eleanor gently squeezed the girl's hand. "It's okay, sweetie. Your dad and I need to talk. Go to your room, okay?" Tessa hesitated, her blue eyes suddenly welling up. "Will you still be here when I come back?" she asked quietly. Elena felt her heart break in two, but before she could answer, Colin intervened. "Go to your room, Tessa. Now." The unusual firmness in her father's voice finally convinced the girl. She left slowly, looking back several times as if afraid Eleanor might disappear if she took her eyes off her. When the sound of Tessa's little footsteps faded down the hall, Colin closed the office door. He turned to Eleanor, his face now clearly consumed by anger and pain. Silent tears streamed down his cheeks, something Elena had never seen before, the ever-controlled Colin Mercer, falling apart before her eyes. "What the hell is going on here?" he asked, his voice trembling with emotion. Elena took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm in her chest. She knew this moment would come eventually, though she hadn't planned for it to be like this. "I'm Tessa's biological mother," she said simply. Colin stared at her as if he couldn't comprehend the words. He ran a hand over his face, angrily wiping away the tears. "What? That's impossible. We adopted Tessa legally. The biological mother relinquished all her rights." "I know, I signed those papers." Colin shook his head as if trying to ward off a nightmare. Fresh tears welled up, and this time he didn't even try to hide them. "Why are you here? Why in my house? How did you find us?" Eleanor placed her cleaning cloth on the desk. Her hands trembled slightly. "It wasn't easy. Closed adoptions are designed to protect everyone's privacy, but I never stopped looking. I hired a private investigator last year." "You followed us." Colin's voice rose a pitch, indignation mixed with disbelief as tears continued to fall. "That's stalking. It's illegal." "No, it wasn't like that," Elena replied quickly. "I just wanted to know if she was okay, if she was happy. When I found out where you lived, I saw the ad for the housekeeper position. It felt like fate." Colin let out a bitter laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Fate! You infiltrated my home under false pretenses. You gained my daughter's trust while lying to all of us." "I never lied about who I was." Elena held his gaze. "I just didn't tell the whole truth. It's the same thing." Colin ran a hand through his hair, visibly distraught, the tears now flowing freely down his face. "You deceived everyone. Me, Mrs. Parker, and worst of all, Tessa, a 5-year-old child." Eleanor felt tears begin to form, but she held them back. She needed to stay strong, to make Colin understand. "I was 17 when Tessa was born," she began, her voice softer. "I was alone. My parents forced me to give her up for adoption. They said it was for the best, especially for her." Colin looked at her, his face wet with tears, a vulnerability in his eyes that Elena had never seen before. "For 5 years, I thought about her every day," Elena continued. "I imagined what her face looked like, if she was okay, if she was loved. When I finally found her," her voice broke. "I couldn't stay away. I had to see her, even if it was from a distance." "So you infiltrated my house, our life," Colin said, his voice broken with raw emotion. "You built a relationship with Tessa, knowing it could destroy everything we've built. I didn't want to take anything from anyone." A tear finally escaped Elena. "I just wanted to see her up close, to get to know her, to know that a part of me was still alive in her." Colin was silent for a moment, looking at the family portrait on his desk. Him, Eliza, and baby Tessa. Tears dripped onto the glass protecting the photograph. A family that no longer existed in that form, but that he fought every day to preserve. "What do you want now?" he finally asked, his voice calmer but still laced with restrained sobs. "Do you want to take her away? Is that it?" "No," Eleanor answered immediately. "I would never do that. I know you're her father, in every way that matters. I just wanted to be a part of her life. Somehow, even if it was just as the housekeeper who makes triangle-shaped sandwiches." For an instant, something softened in Colin's gaze. But as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand as if trying to regain some control. "You need to leave," he said, his voice firm despite the tears still shining in his eyes. "Now. Colin, please. Now." His voice rose. "You can't just show up after 5 years and expect everything to be okay. Tessa is my daughter, mine and Eliza's. We chose her. We loved her when you abandoned her." "I didn't abandon her," Elena protested, tears now streaming freely. "I didn't have a choice." "We all have choices." Colin pointed to the door, his face still wet with tears. "And now you need to go. Don't come back here again. I'll be contacting my lawyers first thing tomorrow." Just then, the office door creaked open. Tessa stood there, her face red and tear-stained. Sally clutched tightly against her chest. "Daddy, why are you crying?" she asked, her voice small and scared. Colin knelt in front of his daughter, quickly trying to wipe his face. "It's nothing, sweetie. Grown-ups sometimes cry when they're surprised. I don't want Elena to leave," Tessa said, her voice choked with sobs. "She's my mom." Colin tried to take a deep breath, but a sob escaped instead. "Sweetheart, it's complicated. Elena, she can't stay with us." "Why?" Tessa sobbed. "Gus, don't you want me to have a mum?" "You have a mum," Colin answered softly, fresh tears escaping. "Mommy Eliza, remember, she's watching over you from heaven." "But Elena is here," Tessa protested, her small shoulders shaking with the force of her crying. "She can be my mum here." "Please, Daddy?" Colin looked at his daughter, then at Elena, who remained motionless, silent tears running down her face. The conflict in his eyes was palpable. Anger, confusion, worry for Tessa, all mixed with the raw pain that overflowed as tears. "I'm sorry, Tessa. My decision is final." He stood up and addressed Elena, wiping his wet face again. "Please go now." Elena felt as if the world was crumbling around her. She looked at Tessa, her little girl, who was now watching her with desperation in her eyes. "Don't go, Mommy," Tessa pleaded, running to hug Elena's legs. "Please, don't go." Elena knelt and hugged her daughter, inhaling the scent of her hair, trying to memorize every detail of that moment. "I have to go now, sunshine," she whispered, "but you are always here." She gently touched Tessa's chest, over her heart. "I don't want you in my heart," Tessa cried, sobbing. "I want you here for real." Colin stepped forward and picked Tessa up, pulling her away from Eleanor. The girl struggled, crying and calling for Eleanor, who stood up on trembling legs. Colin, still with tears in his eyes, looked as broken as she felt. "I'll get my things," she said quietly. "Leave them. I'll have someone deliver them later," Colin replied, still holding the crying Tessa. Elena nodded, unable to say anything more. She cast one last look at Tessa, trying to convey all her love in that brief moment, before turning and walking to the door. "Mommy! Mommy!" Tessa's cries followed her down the hall, each one a knife in her heart. When the front door closed behind her, Eleanor finally allowed the sob stuck in her throat to escape. She staggered to her car and collapsed into the driver's seat, Tessa's desperate cries still echoing in her ears. In the silent house on the hill, Colin held his daughter as she cried herself to sleep, calling for a mother she had just found and lost on the same day. His own tears fell silently onto Tessa's golden hair as he wondered, for the first time, if he had made the right decision. The days following Elena's departure seemed to drag on like endless hours. The Mercer mansion, which had always been a quiet place, now seemed shrouded in a different kind of silence, heavier, more painful, as if the very air had become thick with unspoken words. Colin tried to resume their normal routine. He hired a new housekeeper through the agency, a middle-aged woman named Martha, with impeccable references and an efficient air that didn't invite personal conversation. Mrs. Parker continued to come every day to look after Tessa, but now she spent more time on her phone, as if relieved not to have to compete for the girl's attention, but nothing ever truly went back to normal. It couldn't. On the first morning without Eleanor, Tessa refused to get out of bed. When they finally managed to get her to school, she left her breakfast untouched. Colin received a call from the teacher at the end of the day, informing him that Tessa had spent hours sitting in silence, hugging her rag doll, refusing to participate in activities or talk to the other children. "She's going through a difficult time," Colin explained vaguely. "We'll give it time." But time only seemed to deepen Tessa's sadness. In the following days, Colin noticed that the colorful drawings that once filled her bedroom walls were slowly disappearing, as if the color was being drained from the girl's life. Her colored pencils remained untouched on her desk. The storybooks Elena used to read to her were pushed under the bed, out of sight. On the third day, Colin found Sally, Tessa's inseparable doll, tossed in the corner of the room. When he asked about it, Tessa just shrugged, a gesture so adult, so resigned, that it broke his heart. "I don't want her anymore," she said simply. Colin picked up the doll and placed it carefully on the bed. "Sally will be sad if you don't play with her anymore," he tried. Tessa looked at the doll for a long moment, her blue eyes dull in a way they had never been before. "She'll get over it," she replied, turning her back. That night, Colin sat alone in his office, an untouched glass of whiskey in front of him. The events of the last few days had left him exhausted in a way no business negotiation ever had. The initial anger he had felt upon discovering the truth about Eleanor had given way to a tangle of emotions he could barely unravel. He felt betrayed, yes. Eleanor had entered his home under false pretenses, had grown close to his daughter, knowing all along who she really was. But he also felt something more complex, a sort of reluctant understanding. As a father, he understood the desperation to be near your child, to do anything to protect them, to love them, even from a distance. And there was Tessa, his little Tessa, whose world had been turned upside down. First the loss of Eliza, so young, and now this, finding out she had another mother, a biological one, only to see her taken away in the same instant. Colin ran a hand over his tired face. Had he done the right thing? Had sending Elena away so abruptly protected Tessa, or just caused her more pain? There was no manual for situations like this. The lawyers he had consulted were clear. Legally, he was protected. The adoption was closed. All parental rights had been terminated. Elena had no legal claim on Tessa, but what did that matter when his daughter was suffering so much? The days turned into a week and the week into two. Tessa's sadness slowly gave way to a quietness that was, somehow, even more worrying. She moved through the house like a little ghost, responding when spoken to, eating when food was placed in front of her, doing her homework when asked. But the spark, the flicker of life that Elena had helped rekindle, was gone. On one particularly quiet evening, Colin decided to try for a fresh start. He made dinner himself, a rare feat that resulted in slightly overcooked pasta and jarred tomato sauce, but it was a genuine effort. He set the kitchen table with a tablecloth and candles, just as they used to for the special dinners they had when Eliza was still alive. "Wow," Tessa said when she entered the kitchen. It wasn't exactly enthusiasm, but it was the most animated reaction he had gotten in days. "I thought we could have a night just for us," Colin explained, pulling out her chair. "You know, like old times?" Tessa nodded and sat down, her feet dangling high above the floor. Colin served the pasta and they ate in silence for a few minutes. "Is it good?" he asked hopefully. "Yes," Tessa replied, though her plate was barely touched. But Elena would have added more seasoning. The name hung between them like a ghost. It was the first time Tessa had mentioned Elena since that terrible day. Colin felt a lump in his throat, but forced himself to swallow. "You miss her," he said. It wasn't a question. Tessa nodded, her eyes fixed on her plate. "She was my real mom," she said quietly, "and now she's gone, like Mommy Eliza." Colin put down his fork. The moment he had dreaded, and yet knew he had to face, had arrived. "Tessa, we need to talk about this, about Eleanor, about everything." The girl looked up, waiting. "So does that mean I have two moms?" she asked with the direct simplicity only children possess. The question hit Colin with unexpected force. He felt tears welling up, and for a moment he was speechless. Instead of answering, he stood up, walked around the table and simply hugged his daughter tightly. He felt Tessa's small arms wrap around his neck, and they both stayed like that for a long moment, sharing a pain that was as much his as it was hers. Finally, Colin pulled back a little and looked into his daughter's eyes. The same clear blue eyes as Elena, he realized now. How had he never noticed before? "Yes, you have two mums," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Mommy Eliza, who loved you from the first moment she saw you, and Elena, who gave you life." Tessa absorbed the information, her little face serious. "Why did you send her away?" Colin took a deep breath. How could he explain something so complex to a 5-year-old? But Tessa deserved honesty. "I was angry," he admitted, "and scared. Eleanor didn't tell us who she really was. She came into our lives, into your life, and without telling the truth." "But she's my mom," Tessa insisted. "You always said we shouldn't lie, but you also said family is the most important thing." Colin smiled sadly. His own daughter was giving him a moral lesson, using his own teachings. "You're right. And I realize now that maybe I acted too quickly." He stood up and held out his hand. "Let's go to the living room. I think it's time we told the whole story." In the living room, they sat on the large sofa. Colin took the family photo album from the shelf and opened it on Tessa's lap. "Before you came along," he began, showing a photo of him and Eliza, both smiling at the camera. "Your mum and I tried to have a baby for a long time, but we couldn't." He turned the page, showing a photo of them in an office, signing papers. "So we decided to adopt. We wanted to be parents so badly, to start a family." On the next page was the first photo of them with Tessa, a tiny baby wrapped in a pink blanket, her blue eyes wide at the camera. "When we saw you for the first time, we knew you were our daughter. We chose you with love, Tessa. You were wanted, awaited, and loved from the very first moment." Tessa touched the photo gently. "But I already had a mom, Elena." Colin nodded. "Yes. At the time, they only told us that your birth mother was very young and couldn't take care of you. We didn't know anything else. It was a closed adoption, which means we had no contact with her and she had none with us. Did she give me to you because she didn't want me?" Tessa's voice was small, almost a whisper. No, sweetie. Colin felt his heart clench. I know now that it wasn't like that. Elena was very young, only 17. Her parents forced her to give you up for adoption. She didn't have a choice. How do you know? She told me that day. Colin closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the look on Elena's face as she told her story. She said she thought about you every day, that she never stopped loving you or wondering how you were. Then why didn't she come back sooner? Because in closed adoptions, the birth mother doesn't know where her baby goes. Elena had to search for a very long time to find you. Tessa processed this information, her little face concentrated as if she were solving a very difficult math problem. And when she found me, she pretended to be the housekeeper so she could see me. Yes, Colin replied, realizing how different it sounded now. Less like a calculated deception and more like an act of desperation and love. She just wanted to be near you, to get to know you. She said she didn't want to take me away, Tessa recalled. She just wanted to be my friend. Colin felt a wave of shame. In his anger and fear, he hadn't truly listened to what Eleanor was saying. I think that's true, he admitted. She could have done things differently, but I believe her intentions were good. She loves you, Tessa. Just like me and Mommy Eliza. Tessa was silent for a long moment, slowly turning the pages of the album, watching herself grow through the years, her first steps, her first birthday, moments with Eliza before the illness took over. But I never imagined your birth mother would one day show up, Colin continued softly. It was a surprise for all of us. Tessa closed the album and looked at her father, her clear blue eyes, Eleanor's eyes, serious and thoughtful. So I was always loved, she asked, with a simplicity that hid the depth of the question. Colin felt the tears return, and this time he didn't try to hold them back. More than anything, he replied, his voice thick. By me, by Mommy Eliza, and I know now by Elena too. You were always loved, Tessa, by all of us. Something in the girl's face changed then. A shadow seemed to lift, like clouds being pushed away by the wind. She leaned over and hugged her father. A real hug, the first since Elena had left. I love you, Daddy, she said against his chest. I love you too, Princess, more than you'll ever know. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other on the sofa as night fell outside. It wasn't a solution to everything, Colin knew. There was still much to resolve, many difficult conversations ahead, but it was a start, a moment of honesty, of true reconnection between father and daughter. When they finally separated, Tessa asked, her voice small but determined, Can we call Elena? Colin hesitated. Part of him still wanted to protect his family, to keep complications at bay, to go back to the life they knew before. But looking at his daughter's hopeful face, he realized there was no going back. Elena was in their lives now, for better or for worse. Not today, he answered gently. But I promise we will find a way for her to be a part of your life again, in a way that's good for all of us. Tessa nodded, satisfied with the promise. Can I draw something for her? For when we see her again? A genuine smile appeared on Colin's face, the first in weeks. That's a wonderful idea. That night, as Tessa slept, once again clutching her doll Sally, Colin sat on the porch with a glass of whiskey, looking at the stars. He thought of Eliza, of how she always said that love wasn't a limited resource, that the more you gave, the more you had. I'm trying to do the right thing, he murmured to the sky, imagining that maybe somehow she could hear him, for all of us. The next morning, when Colin went to wake Tessa for school, he found her already awake, sitting at the small desk in her room, focused on a colorful drawing. For the first time in weeks, the colored pencils were scattered around her, and her cheeks had a faint blush of excitement. What are you drawing? He asked from the doorway. Tessa held up the paper, showing 3 figures holding hands, a tall one with dark hair, a small one in the middle with blonde hair, and another blonde adult. Above them, an angelic figure hovered, watching over the scene with a smile. Our family, Tessa replied simply. 2 weeks had passed since the conversation between Colin and Tessa. Although the girl had started drawing again and seemed less withdrawn, there was still a sadness in her eyes that Colin couldn't ignore. She asked about Elena every day, usually at the most unexpected times, during breakfast, on the way to school, before bed. When are we going to call Elena? Is she going to come visit? Can we send my drawing to her? Colin always answered with a vague soon, while he internally battled his fears and doubts. Even though he had promised his daughter they would find a way to bring Elena back into her life, he didn't know how to do it without giving up the control he valued so much. Or worse, without risking losing Tessa to her biological mother. But that Saturday morning, as he watched Tessa play alone in the garden, talking to her doll Sally about Elena, Colin finally made his decision. His daughter's happiness was worth more than his pride or his fears, and maybe, just maybe, there was room for Eleanor in their lives without it meaning he would lose her. Finding Eleanor wasn't difficult. Despite his anger on the day of the confrontation, Colin had carefully kept the address and phone number from her employee file. He drove to the small apartment complex on the east side of the city, a modest but well-kept place with flower pots in the windows and bicycles locked up at the entrance. Sitting in his Audi, looking at the building where Elena lived, Colin felt a pang of shame. She could have chosen to live anywhere, as long as it was close to Tessa. The simplicity of the place showed that her motivation truly wasn't financial. Finally, he gathered the courage to get out of the car and walk up the 3 flights of stairs to apartment 3B. His heart pounded as he knocked on the door, half hoping, half dreading she would answer. After a few moments, the door opened. Elena looked paler and thinner than he remembered. Her blue eyes, so similar to Tessa's, widened in surprise when she recognized him. "Colin," she said, her voice little more than a whisper. "Hi, Eleanor." He hesitated, suddenly unsure. "May I come in?" She nodded and stepped aside. The apartment was small but cozy. There were plants in the windows, books stacked on simple shelves, and photographs in small frames. Colin immediately noticed Tessa's drawing framed on the main wall. "Me and my new friend." "Would you like some coffee?" Elena offered, clearly nervous. "No, thank you. I don't plan to stay long." They sat in the small living room, an uncomfortable silence hanging between them. Colin watched Elena discreetly, noticing how she sat upright, her hands clasped in her lap, as if bracing for bad news. "Tessa is very sad," he said finally, getting straight to the point. "She misses you." Elena blinked quickly, as if holding back tears. "I miss her too, every day." She hesitated before continuing. "How is she?" "Better than in the first few weeks. She started drawing again. She talks about you constantly." A small smile touched Elena's lips, quickly replaced by a more serious expression. "Colin, I want you to know I don't want to take your daughter from you. I just want to be present." Her eyes met his, sincere and direct. "Thank you for taking care of her and raising her. You're a good father. Tessa is lucky to have you." The words seemed to hit Colin in a way he hadn't expected. For weeks, he had prepared for a battle, imagined Elena as a threat to his family. Instead, he found a woman thanking him for caring for the daughter she was forced to give up. "I told her the truth," Colin said, "about the adoption, about you being her biological mother. I tried to explain it in the best way possible for a 5-year-old. How did she react?" "Surprisingly well. Children have an incredible capacity to accept things as they are." He paused. She asked if she was always loved. Elena covered her mouth with her hand, emotional. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that she was always loved. By me, by Eliza." He looked directly at Elena. "And by you." They were silent for a moment, the weight of those words hanging between them. "I came here to propose something," Colin continued finally. "An arrangement so you can be a part of Tessa's life again, gradually, with clear boundaries, in a way that's good for everyone." Elena's face lit up with hope. "I'm willing to agree to any condition. I just want to see her again. To start, maybe you can visit on the weekends, at our house, where she feels safe. Over time, we'll see how things go." "That would be wonderful," Elena replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Colin. This means everything." Colin nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief. The decision that had tormented him so much now seemed so obviously right that he wondered why he had resisted for so long. "She made a drawing for you," he commented, taking a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Ours advance thanks for your positive response," as she put it. Eleanor unfolded the drawing with trembling hands. It showed 3 figures, Colin, Tessa, and herself, in front of a large house. In the sky, an angelic figure with dark hair watched over the scene. "Eliza," Colin explained softly. "Tessa says she still watches over all of us." A tear ran down Elena's cheek as she traced the outline of the drawing with her fingers. "It's perfect," she whispered. The following Sunday, Elena appeared at the Mercer's door at exactly 2 in the afternoon, holding a package wrapped in colorful paper and trying to control her nerves. Colin greeted her with a polite formality that soon turned into something more relaxed when Tessa came running down the hall. "Eleanor!" the girl shouted, throwing herself into her arms. "You came back!" "I came back. Sunshine," Eleanor replied, hugging her tightly. Her eyes closed as if trying to memorize the feeling. "I missed you so much." Colin watched the scene with a mix of emotions. There was still a pang of apprehension, a protective instinct that might never completely disappear. But there was also something new, a deeper understanding, perhaps even the beginning of acceptance. The afternoon passed peacefully. They had tea in the garden. Eleanor and Tessa drew together at the kitchen table, and later, the 3 of them took a short walk around the neighborhood. To an outside observer, they might have looked just like a normal family enjoying a sunny Sunday. When it was time for Elena to leave, Tessa hugged her for a long time. "You'll come back, right?" she asked, her blue eyes full of worry. "Of course I will. Next weekend, if your dad allows it." They both looked at Colin, who nodded with a small smile. "I can't wait," Tessa said, jumping with joy. After Elena left, Colin found Tessa in her room, humming as she organized her toys, something she hadn't done on her own initiative for weeks. "Did you enjoy seeing Elena today?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. "It was the best day ever," Tessa exclaimed, spinning with her arms outstretched. "Can we do this every Sunday? Forever?" Colin smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "We'll see. One step at a time, okay?" That night, as he watched Tessa sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks, Colin realized something fundamental had changed. Looking back, he saw how his initial fear had blinded him to what really mattered, his daughter's happiness. And maybe, just maybe, there was enough room in their lives for one more kind of love. Not a love that replaces, but one that adds, that enriches, that completes. Autumn gave way to winter, and snow began to cover the city in a white blanket. Elena's visits, initially limited to Sunday afternoons, gradually expanded. First, a full day on the weekend. Then occasionally during the week as well. The stiffness of the first few meetings transformed into a comfortable routine, though still carefully choreographed. Colin observed this evolution with a mixture of caution and fascination. His initial worries, that Elena would try to pull Tessa away from him, that the girl would be confused by the presence of 2 parental figures, slowly dissipated as reality unfolded before his eyes. Instead of creating confusion, Elena's presence seemed to bring balance to Tessa's life. The girl flourished with the extra attention, like a plant finally receiving the right amount of light and water. Her drawings, once filled with lonely figures or incomplete families, now overflowed with color and smiles. One December afternoon, Colin arrived home earlier than usual. He would normally announce his arrival, but something made him stop at the living room door when he heard laughter coming from the kitchen. He approached silently and watched the scene through the slightly open door. Elena and Tessa were covered in flour, attempting to make what looked like Christmas cookies. Dough was spread across the kitchen counter as they cut out shapes with makeshift cookie cutters. Tessa was laughing uncontrollably as Elena told a story, making funny voices and expansive gestures that sent even more flour into the air. And then Tom Thumb's grandmother said, "If you don't stop stealing my pies, I'll turn you into a frog." Elena made a high, shaky voice, wagging a flour-covered finger at Tessa. "But Grandma, the pies are so yummy," Tessa replied, getting into character with a deep voice. "Oh, in that case." Elena grabbed a handful of flour and threatened to throw it. "I'll turn you into a ghost." Tessa shrieked with delight, trying to hide behind a chair as she saw Elena approach with the flower. It was at that moment that they both noticed Colin standing in the doorway, watching them. "Daddy!" Tessa exclaimed, running to him, leaving white footprints on the kitchen floor. "We're making Christmas cookies. Elena is teaching me her grandmother's recipe." Colin smiled, lifting his daughter into his arms without caring about the flower that now covered his expensive suit. "I can see that. It looks like you're having fun." Elena blushed, suddenly seeming embarrassed by the mess. "Sorry about the kitchen. We'll clean everything up, I promise." "Don't worry about it," Colin replied, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. "It's good to see you two having fun." The look they exchanged in that moment held something new, a silent complicity, a mutual recognition that, somehow, they were managing to navigate these uncharted waters together. As the days went by, Colin found himself watching Elena with a different gaze, no longer as an intruder or a threat, but as a complex person with her own story. He noticed her infinite patience with Tessa's questions, the gentle way she corrected the girl's mistakes without diminishing her enthusiasm, the quiet strength with which she faced difficult situations. One particularly cold evening, while Elena was helping Tessa with her bath before leaving, Colin found a small notebook forgotten in the living room. He knew he shouldn't look, but curiosity got the better of him. He opened it and found what appeared to be a diary, not from the adult Elena, but from the teenager she had been. "My baby was born today. She is perfect. Blonde hair like mine, blue eyes that seem to see right through to the soul. I named her Tessa, harvest in Greek, because she is the most precious fruit I have ever produced. Tomorrow they will take her away. My parents say it's for the best, that I'm too young, that she'll have more opportunities. But how can it be for the best to rip out a piece of my heart? I'm writing this so I don't forget. So that one day, if we ever get the chance to meet again, I can tell her, I never wanted to let you go." Colin quickly closed the notebook when he heard footsteps approaching. He put it back where he had found it, feeling an unexpected emotion tighten his throat. Those words, written years ago by a scared girl, touched something deep within him. For the first time, he truly understood what Eleanor had sacrificed. The following week, during one of Eleanor's visits, an unexpected blizzard covered the city. The roads became impassable, and Colin insisted she spend the night in the guest room. "Can't I go to bed yet?" Tessa asked at bedtime, looking from Colin to Elena with pleading eyes. "I want Elena to tell me a story." Colin hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, just one story, then it's time to sleep." Elena followed Tessa to her room, while Colin remained at the door, watching. Tessa settled into bed, hugging her doll Sally, while Elena sat on the edge of the mattress. "What story do you want to hear tonight?" Elena asked. "Found the one about the girl who found her family," Tessa replied promptly. "It's my favorite." Colin realized this must be a story they shared often. He leaned against the doorframe, curious. "Once upon a time," Eleanor began, her voice soft and melodic, "there was a little girl who lived in a big house on top of a hill. The house had everything anyone could ever want: beautiful toys, soft clothes, delicious food. But even so, the girl felt like something was missing." "What was missing?" Tessa asked, though she clearly already knew the answer. "Stories were missing," Elena replied, gently stroking Tessa's hair. "Stories about where she came from, about who she was." "And then the cleaning fairy appeared," Tessa exclaimed, making Colin smile at the childish interpretation. "Yes, someone special appeared who knew many stories. And together the girl and her new friend discovered that their stories were connected, like two books from the same series." "And the girl's father?" Tessa asked, glancing quickly at Colin in the doorway. "Oh, he was the keeper of the stories, the girl's protector. At first he was afraid of the new stories, because he thought they might erase the old ones. But he soon realized that stories don't work that way. The more stories we have, the richer our world becomes." Colin felt something warm spread through his chest upon hearing those words. It was a simplification, of course, but there was a profound truth there that he couldn't deny. "And did they live happily ever after?" Tessa asked, her eyes already heavy with sleep. Eleanor glanced briefly at Colin before answering. "They discovered that happily ever after isn't a destination, but a journey, and they decided to take that journey together, one day at a time. When Tessa finally fell asleep, Eleanor quietly left the room. Colin was waiting for her in the hallway. "That's a beautiful story," he commented. "Thank you," Elena smiled shyly. "I hope you don't mind my liberal interpretation of events. Actually, I think you captured the essence perfectly." That night marked a turning point. For the first time, the three of them had dinner together in the kitchen, like a family. There were no grand declarations or dramatic moments, just easy conversation about everyday things: Tessa's science project at school, a difficult client Colin faced at work, a new recipe Elena wanted to try. As he watched Elena and Tessa interact during dinner, Colin was struck by a sudden clarity. There was something natural, something right about the way the two of them connected. It wasn't just the physical resemblance, the same blonde hair, the same light blue eyes, the same slightly crooked smile, but something deeper, a resonance of spirits that no separation had managed to erase. And instead of feeling excluded from this bond, as he had initially feared, Colin discovered he had his own place in this emerging dynamic. Where Eleanor brought creativity and open affection, he offered stability and protection. They were complementary qualities, not competitive ones. After Tessa went to bed, Colin and Elena sat in the living room with cups of tea, the silence between them comfortable in a way it had never been before. "Thank you," Colin said finally. Elena looked at him, surprised. "For what?" "For not giving up on her, for having the courage to come back even knowing you might be rejected." He paused. "And for being patient with me, too." "I didn't have a choice," Elena replied simply. "She's my daughter." Then she quickly added, "Our daughter." Colin nodded, accepting the correction. The next morning, the snow had stopped and the sun was shining on the white blanket covering the city. Tessa woke up early, eager to play in the snow before Eleanor had to leave. The three of them went out into the garden, where they built a chubby snowman that Tessa insisted on naming Mr. Cookie, in honor of the cookies they had made together. Watching Tessa run around the garden, throwing snowballs into the air and laughing when they fell on her head, Colin felt a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. He looked at Elena, who was watching their daughter with the same look of love and admiration he recognized in himself. "You know," he said, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air, "we don't have all the answers, but maybe we can try to be a family, for our daughter's sake." Eleanor looked at him, her blue eyes shining with restrained emotion. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "I'm not sure of anything," Colin smiled, "but I think it's worth a try." Elena smiled back, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "I think so too." Tessa, who had apparently overheard part of the conversation, came running up to them, snow clinging to her red hat. "Look what I made," she exclaimed, holding out a piece of paper she had brought hidden in her coat pocket. It was a drawing, hastily made that morning, 3 figures holding hands in front of a snow-covered house. Underneath, in her childish handwriting, she had written, "We're trying to be a family." Colin and Eleanor looked at each other over Tessa's head, and something silent passed between them, not a grand promise or a dramatic declaration, but a quiet acceptance of possibilities, a willingness to build something new together. "It's perfect, sweetie," Colin said, hugging his daughter. "Can I hang it on the fridge?" Tessa asked. "Of course you can," Eleanor smiled. "That's where families put the important things, isn't it?" The house on the hill, which had been wrapped in silence for so long, now seemed to vibrate with new possibilities, as if finally it had learned how to smile. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.